I am so excited to welcome Paige to the podcast. Welcome, Paige.
Thank you. So good to be here.
I'm so happy to be here. So, Paige and I met through the Women Thrives Summit, which we were both speakers at. She spoke last year, I spoke this year, but you actually co-authored a book with the organizers, didn't you?
Yes, that launched last year. It was the second volume, and I'm now a book mentor and editor for the current volume of authors, which has been a dream in itself. So that was a fantastic project.
I haven't even talked to you about that yet. We just chatted up for like 10 minutes and I didn't even get to that. That is so exciting. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So, Paige, oh my gosh, how do you say your last name? Frisone?
Frisone, yeah.
Frisone. Okay. Yay. Okay. Paige Frisone is a subconscious health practitioner, professional writer, author, yin yoga instructor, and international award winning impact speaker. Wow. She is the founder and owner of her integrative practice called Inner Realm Wellness, LLC, where she guides men and women to heal the root emotions signaling physical disease using over 14 different modalities from Eastern and Western medicine combined. Wow, that's a lot, Paige.
Yeah, it is. It's a little insane, but it's my passion and it's something I love geeking out about. And my number one preface when hearing that, because it continues to be wild to me to hear it, is that nobody needs to understand what we're doing. It matters to me that you do understand why we're doing it, because I want that like conscious, logical part to be on board, of course. But there's no expectation for you to be like a wizard in the ways that you
Right.
might think you need to be in order to heal. You don't have to have a prereq other than a willingness to show up and feel better.
Right. So I'm skipping over your backstory because I just want to like find out what do people come to you for usually? Is it kind of anything and everything that they want to heal within themselves?
Yeah, it is really vast because I genuinely feel, and this isn't just because I'm biased, like I genuinely feel that every single person can benefit from doing subconscious work because as humans, we all have symptoms that have unprocessed emotional roots at the center of them. When
Yes.
we process our emotions, we heal the body. That is just what it is. And often we can't find those emotions on a conscious level because they're two different parts of the brain. So often people will come to me for chronic diseases. I see a lot of like stomach digestive stuff. I see a lot of autoimmune. I see a lot of like mental health stuff is so common as far as anxiety, depression. A lot of people have co-occurring diagnoses. They're in therapy. They see their nutritionist, their psychiatrist, their psychologist. They have their whole team and they're still struggling with these behavioral patterns or these maladaptive coping mechanisms, self-harm, like I see all across the board. So however somebody comes in, whether it's for physical things or emotional things, we always end up intersecting in some manner.
That's amazing. So tell me about how it is you got to this space, a little bit about your story.
Yeah, you bet. So I have a wild kind of roundabout story, which I share in the Women Thrive Volume 2 in retrospect. And I share my story in these kind of vignettes. It's a very fragmented journey because of repressed memories that I only reclaimed access to 5 years ago. I attribute my reclamation of these 2 decades of memories to subconscious healing work because I can't know what I don't know, right? And I was really thrown into the therapy and Western medical system as a kid. I suffered from chronic night terrors from ages 1 to 7, where I'd wake up screaming bloody murder every night due to shadows and personal invasions and things that I was clearly dreaming, but not able to remember come morning. And inevitably, I was susceptible to having these like psychic attacks come nighttime. So I had all these rituals, a lot of different things going on with my brain, having scans in the hospital, going into therapy starting first grade, and really just a sensitive kid, not able to understand what was happening to me. And it oriented, developmentally in my brain, this program of fear and paralysis of just being afraid of my mind, afraid of the world, afraid of my everything, my relationships. I was bullied at school. I never really felt safe anywhere. And that developed into a really hard teenage decade of depression, anxiety, self-harm. I developed an eating disorder in college, anorexia, and I was thrown into all different levels of care in the treatment space, which I'm very grateful for. It obviously helped me understand firsthand a lot of the benefits of, like Western care, but also a lot of the limitations of Western care. And nobody was really addressing the root cause. Like everyone's asking me why, as if I hadn't spent all my life asking myself why, right? Like, why me? Why this? Why now? What's wrong with me? I feel broken and bad and crazy and wrong. And I was on a cocktail of medications for things that didn't make any sense, and obviously treating side effects of the pills. And so I couldn't really find my truth in the sea of everybody's stories about what could be going on. And at the same time, thankfully, as a soul, I'm a seeker in nature. So I was studying, I'm a writer predominantly. That was my first love. But I was also studying contemplative psychology. I was studying botanical medicine. I was studying alternative and integrative methods. And I had a whole lot of indirect journeys and initiations, spiritual awakenings that led me back to this subconscious realm where I'm like, okay, in this Western world, conventionally, people are only addressing top down. They obviously serve symptoms and they don't serve the root. They obviously profit off of these pills and not really care about the person. And not that people in that world didn't obviously change my life. They certainly did, and thank goodness. But I was kind of forced back into myself, into a deeper way. Like, what is the reason for this? Does it come from this life? Does it come from past life? Does it come from generational trauma, or all the above? And I became certified in this very comprehensive system that I launched a business about, because it was the most effective process that I'd found for myself in my recovery to help me learn that I can heal whatever the circumstance.
That is incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I know that's very vulnerable, and just in the sharing alone, I felt like my energetically, like my heart just was like expanding. I was so like drawn into that and so happy for you. And I could feel the feelings of, I think we all go through something as children and teenagers. It's very difficult years for us, but to have night terrors and eating disorders and all of that, and then having people ask you why, and as a kid, you don't know why. It's like they're looking for children to be answering deep questions about themselves and expecting them to know and understand themselves, which I think is a very unrealistic expectation and kind of like further impacts the psyche, don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many layers of trauma, because it's not just the original incident of whenever your subconscious shotted that imprint of unsafety. It wasn't just the incident, it's your relationship to the incident. And
Yeah.
so the longer I struggled and the longer I didn't have answers to give myself or others, the worse it got, obviously, because I just felt like innately broken. And then I have confirmation bias, and then my physiology starts expressing those thought patterns and those limiting beliefs. And it's like, that's why I don't agree with the quote, when you know better, you do better. Because we don't. We know better and we don't do better, because we're habituated towards reaction. We're habituated towards survival. And I lived so long in survival that I didn't even know that I was in it, because it just was what it was. And it wasn't until coming out with the reclamation of memories and sharing that journey in the Women Thrive volume book 2 that I shared repressed like sexual trauma too, that I didn't even know was there until 5 years ago. And so it's spun my whole world open again. And I think that this healing journey is so humbling, because you just never know how much is really in that subconscious realm. It's 95% of our experiences. And I'm just really grateful that my life is my life, even though I have days that completely bring me to my knees still. It's just very beautiful and raw and, real. And I hope that in that I can shed some light on those that are still in that dark space, because I really know what that feels like.
That's incredible. And I think it's so powerful that you have been through something like that yourself. You've made the transformation, you've come out of it. And so, I mean, there are people that have come out of their traumas and healed their traumas, and they aren't necessarily always going to be the right person to help guide someone through. But in addition to healing your own traumas, you have studied these modalities so deeply to understand them so that you can use both your experience as well as that subconscious lens and the just step by step, like, what do I do with each modality? How can I integrate them together? I think integrating different modalities, which is something that I do too, is incredibly powerful, because if you just use one tool, like just hypnosis, just breath work, just Reiki, all these different things, yes, they can be powerful on their own. But when you really have the ability to tune in to the person in front of you, listen to their story through their story that they've put on the events that have happened to them, because that's kind of the key, right? The story that we tell ourselves about the events can be very different from the story someone else would share that exact same event. And that story that we tell ourselves and that we repeat over time can morph and evolve and change and become distorted and become a huge monster to where it completely envelops them and takes them over and becomes their whole personality, or takes over every area of their life. And it's so important to know that that is just a story that we can actually heal, we can change, we can transform, we can transmute, and we can go back to that subconscious event. And we don't have to necessarily relive. I don't know how you feel about that. I don't think you actually have to relive the actual event or events that have happened, because as children and teenagers, we have a higher likelihood of completely forgetting about or shutting it out. So I'm so sorry that you had to find that out later on, what happened to you, but I am also very glad that you were able to find out and then heal that. But once you have kind of healed that story and come through to the other side, I just think that having multiple tools that are like custom tailored to each client becomes so much more powerful, like exponentially more powerful than just one simple modality. So that's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've always had an affinity for what I call the inner realm or the invisible realm, right? Because the subconscious is unseen, and this world doesn't really prioritize things that we don't see, because we can't believe it if we don't see it. We're always seeking that external proof or that evidence or that, tangible manifestation, which is brilliant. But that only caters to the conscious logical brain, because the analysis paralysis needs that fact and, numeric. And while that matters and there's absolutely a place for that, how much of our life is informed by the invisible? Most of it. And so there's been a huge gift, and it's one that I continue making peace with, which is that I was initiated into the unseen very young, seeing things that I couldn't recall, but were happening anyway. And my body was being wired to remember, like I was wired into stress and wired into, trauma. And I think that we all are as kids. Like, birth is traumatic. I think being on the planet is innately traumatic. And the way that the brain develops, because we have precognition and we don't remember our memories until a certain age, right? Like, we're subject to these imprints of sensation and thoughts and feelings and things that we don't even know aren't ours, because we weren't in conscious control of our environment at that time, but we were taking in all of these bits of information. And so that's, as a seeker, kind of fun for me. Like, I love emotions. I think, it's fun to piece things together, especially if you don't have the information and you feel like your health is on the line or your healing is on the line and it requires that information. I was going to do everything I could, to figure out what the missing pieces of the puzzle were. And I'm not so attached to the answers, quote unquote, because they're ever changing. Like, we're human and I'm always healing and I always have more to do. And so I don't want to get too attached to outcome, because I just want to be in the messiness and complexity of life. But I think what's so powerful about the subconscious is that it's vibrational sustainable vibrational wellness. And when somebody can feel you, even if you're having a hard day or a hard time, your vibration is going to overpower whatever's coming out of your mouth. People can like feel what you mean versus what you say. And so if they know that you're integrous, they'll feel it versus you trying to prove yourself. And so I can have a really bad time. I, struggle in all the ways I struggle and still show up in my conviction, and people will just let that speak for itself, because I think that matters, right?
Yeah, that's incredible. So I want to know, why do you think it's so imperative that there is an understanding of the subconscious lens when you are helping someone through something like a trauma?
I mean, I feel that all trauma is subconscious. Every single thing that we think, that we feel, the ways that we behave that we're not choosing to experience and are still experiencing is subconscious. It's a reflex. It's like if you go to the doctor and they hit your knee and your knee pops out, it's the same thing. It's happening involuntarily. And so that's not an excuse to be in victim. That's not an excuse to stay in that energy of like, why is this happening to me? What's wrong with me? Blah, blah. I lost a lot of my life to that, right? It's really a beautiful awakening or urgent call into your power. Because a lot of people are like, if we are 95% programmed towards shadow, towards struggle, towards stress, how are we here for infinite power and potential? I'm like, well, it's the equal and opposite. It's the law of contrast. We have to have these dual principles in healing to understand that if you have struggled, which we all have, you also are here to experience the equal and opposite. And some spiritual masters, teachers, people will, say that the light is even stronger. The light, even though it's equal and opposite on the principal scale of energy, it weighs more because that frequency is harmonious, right? And there's different levels of frequencies based on the emotions that you might be able to tap into. And so I feel like the Western conventional therapy system is missing the boat when it comes to the subconscious. It's not taught in school. Nobody understands this from an anatomical lens, from a biological lens, from a physiological lens. Like people see it in a very spiritual woo-woo way. And this is science that we're talking about. You can study quantum physics, you can study, energy and matter and atoms in the body, like the way that electricity is comprised, the way that the connective tissues exist, the way that cells communicate. This is just fact. And I don't really understand why people don't understand that, but that is part of my why, and part of my passion is to help people really normalize that we are here to heal no matter what. And whatever comes up in response to me saying that, if you're like, no, we're not, or that's, BS or whatever, that's the work, because that's a program that's been downloaded to keep you from knowing your true power. And I can say it all day long, but it's really for you to experience for yourself your own wisdom. And once you do, you won't settle for less anymore. And I'm just really here to cast that shadow. So I love bridging subconscious and conscious together, right? It doesn't have to be one or the other. This is not to negate anything else that exists out there. I think that if there were more medical professionals that could blend with non-medical professionals, that would be a fantastic, idealistic world that we could live in. If therapists could start using more subconscious stuff as well, I think that would be a beautiful world to live in. And there are more people doing that, at least in my area, because I live in a progressive healing hub, but that's not true for everywhere. So I just am here to help everybody know, like, do what you do and do what works. But if you're only addressing 5%, we're not getting anywhere.
Yes, I love that. And I also love that you brought up, like, you didn't say it exactly like this, but kind of bridging that gap of spirituality and science and recognizing that it's all the same. It's really, to me, it's really just the words you put to it. So I think that anything in this world can be explained scientifically, and it can also be explained spiritually. And this is where a lot of people have arguments, like literal fights. They lose relationships over it. Like, this is spiritual. No, this is scientific. And it's like, guys, whatever lens you want to see it through, that is your choice. However, because there can be both types of explanations, why don't we accept that and come together? You know what I mean? So I even think of like brain waves. Like, I talk about like the different types of brain waves that we have throughout the day. There's alpha, theta, beta, gamma, all sorts of brain waves that our mind is going through. And scientifically, there's an explanation, right, of what state our brain is in, what frequency it's at, what it can receive, what it can give off, what stage of sleep that's related to. That's all very scientific. And then on the other side, you can also look at it as like, I am more connected to God when I'm in this state of mind, when I'm in prayer, when I'm in meditation, or when I'm in a heightened state, I'm just feeling like crap. There are so many different ways that you can explain the exact same thing. So I think just knowing that and having someone, like having a practitioner like you to really like take whatever the client is believing about that state and kind of like, for me, I use their language, and I always ask someone their spiritual truth. Like that's a no brainer. Like I always ask that question, like, what is your spiritual truth? Because then it kind of tailors how I explain things to them, or what I use in my sessions with them. Is that something that you do too?
It's brilliant. I mean, I usually just kind of roll more fluidly from intuition, but I think that having
Mm,
that solid question is beautiful, because I mean, I'm not here to impose any truth on anybody. I'm here to help, like
yeah.
you, like I'm here to help people understand what their own truth is for them. Yeah, so I usually just use very like, generalized language, the universe, spirit, source, God, creator, whatever
Yeah.
you want, you choose. Like it's a
Right. You kind
right?
of give a buffet, and then they
Yeah.
can kind of like take from it because you're so, non-judgmental and very grounded. And I love that about you. I think people can really resonate with that in that general way. But it is funny to me how people get so stuck in like the scientific versus the spiritual. Um, so what do you think like I don't know if we really talked about this. Did you talk about like the repercussions of not having that that subconscious um knowledge and understanding? It's just that they're leaving a lot on the table, right? Because they're only looking at the surface level.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's that quote that nothing changes if nothing changes. So
Yeah.
if for me, it feels really important as a practitioner to own my bias and own my positionality, right? Like I need to understand, just as is true for everything and everyone, systems innately have limitations. Like nothing is perfect, right? And that helps me not stay in judgment and bitterness, right? Because I feel like I was a casualty of the Western med system personally. However, I use Western aspects into my practice as well. I think it's designed for acute and ambulatory care. It should remain that way. However, there is a shadow side to it. It's no longer just for that. It is a prescription based system where people are the repercussions of that, because we're not treating the root, we're not helping people understand their innate power and potential to heal themselves, is that we're muting our ability to know our ancient roots, our wisdom, our cellular memory, and as a result, not only are we medicated and sick, but we're going to stay medicated and sick because there's profit in that. It's a capitalistic society. And I don't know. I think that the repercussions of that are absolutely monumental, because we get further and further away from our body. We get further and further away from our spirit. And so there's just these levels of disconnect, right, on every single level, where we've given our power away. We've given our agency up to the experts and the doctors and the pills. And again, not that there's not a time and place for that, but my job is really to help people like have that discernment to know what to call in and who to call in and when, because I'm stubborn as heck. And I'm somebody who's been through all of the possible options of treatment and recovery time and time again. A revolving door patient is what I called myself. I was in and out every couple months because I couldn't sustain my own power on my own, because I didn't know it existed. I gave it away to everybody and everything else. And I thought that I was gonna be loved and cared for inside those safe, quote unquote, spaces where they were supposed to, understand me. They were supposed to see me. And again, some of them really did, but there were also catastrophes in that space that happened. There was more re-traumatization that happened too. There's a huge shadow there. And to the extent nobody can give me my answers for me except me, to the extent nobody can live my life for me except me, to the extent nobody can save me except me, right? There were severe issues that I accumulated that weren't there originally as a result of not being treated from a subconscious standpoint. And so it's my dream to be able to go back into those spaces, whether it's clinical or non-clinical, and have the 95% awareness and be like, let's start from the bottom up instead of the top down and see what happens. Right? Like, let's like reverse
Yeah.
the script a little bit here and see if there's more to the story. And not everyone's gonna, do it my way or like it my way. But it's another way that I feel like is sorely missing in the system right now.
Yeah, and I think it's just so great that you're helping to spread this awareness, because this conversation we're having, the words that you're speaking, not everyone has probably even heard of these concepts, and they just kind of accept everything as is in Western medicine, which I am a registered nurse and I have been for 14 years. So I have worked in a lot of different settings, mostly ambulatory care. And I can tell you that I have always had kind of a pit in my stomach with some of the things that I have had to even advise patients on or treat patients with, because I know in my heart that there could be another way for this person, and I could see the openness, and there are professional boundaries there that I just can't cross. I have to adhere to my license. And yet there have been so many amazing moments as well where I felt like I'm going to just sit here with this patient and talk to them, and I don't want to say like open their mind up, but just give them loving encouragement and share with them other options. Um, Again, it's been hard to not kind of push those boundaries a bit, but I feel like the more we can bring this level of awareness to people that are in the medical field, because I believe that most everybody in the medical field has the best of intentions. They really do. And that's why I think COVID was really hard for me to watch a lot of what's the word? Like just separation, um, adversity, us against them, people blaming doctors and nurses, and me being on this side of like, we care so much and we want the best for humanity, and this is the choices that we're making. And then kind of like over time feeling like maybe that wasn't the best way to approach things. But I think, number one, it's okay to change your mind, and that's something that we all need to understand. It's okay to evolve your beliefs. It's okay to be open-minded and listen with a level of discernment to someone and decide for themselves with their intuition. And if you can deepen your level of connection with your intuition, bonus, because when you can decide with your intuition, if, hey, what this person is saying resonates with me, maybe I should talk to them or ask them some more questions. Or maybe they say, no, absolutely not, I'm just going to stay in my comfort zone. That's fine too. Whatever people decide is fine for them. But I think it's so important to have these conversations more openly, get them out in the world, and have people understand that there can be another way. And also another way of subconscious healing and all these modalities can work alongside Western medicine. You can have both.
Yes.
I mean, I can't even, I have too many personal stories I'm not going to share. But I want to know, what are some examples of ways that you have facilitated healing for your own clients? Do you have any like, I don't know, testimonial type story example?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, and it's funny
Sure.
because, here we are, we've been talking about science and spirituality, and I really appreciate, what you just shared about being a nurse too, because I think like COVID really did bring up the underbelly of the shadow of the system, everything that we're talking about. Like that's what it was. It kind of
Yeah.
just showed things in a different light and forced so many into crisis, of course, but forced so many into that urgent call, the awakening to understand that we
Yes.
actually are very powerful and we do have the discernment, but because that's not like a well versed muscle in us, because that's not something that's conditioned. When we're young, we're like, go to the doctor, you have a fever, go to the doctor, this is the thing, go to the doctor, right? And that's just the program on a societal collective level. And so it makes sense why something so acute would erupt into some division, because there's new awareness that comes, there's new awakenings, there's new choices and options and things that people haven't explored before. And so I think there was beauty in that for sure. But because of that, right, we're still feeling the aftermath of so much of what happened in 2020 that has changed the world forever in some ways. I have, seen a lot of people coming, unfortunately, with a lot of acute diagnoses. Like I had a 29-year young girl who was diagnosed with endometrial cancer, and she came to me, and even in one session, 90 minutes, she was like, I can feel it leaving. I can feel it moving, right? I can feel it like it's resistant, but also it's like responding, right? Because resistance is a response too. I work really hard to honor all parts. We're not here to push the shadow away. We're not here to like blame it or shame it for being so protective of all of us. It's there for a reason, to keep you alive. And once we can befriend those parts and honor those parts, they heal. So seeing that shift even in one session was monumental. And I have no guarantees for anybody that somebody will shift that quickly. It's dependent on their system. It's case by case. People come in for all kinds of reasons. There's one person I've been seeing for maybe a year now, and he came in specifically for depression and anxiety, but the secondary curiosity of like, hey, I've heard you talking about a lot of spiritual principles. There are all of these different modalities out there. Where do I start? And I'm like, well, why not start with like a whole taster platter of everything? Because there's a whole comprehensive amount of things that we do together. So he came in for depression, anxiety, and he's just like woken up to this whole spiritual consciousness. And what you said earlier was perfect, is understanding his spiritual truth for like the very first time. He's Indian. He has a background of having certain principles indoctrinated into him that don't serve. There are some that he's coming back to for the first time, in many years, that he's like, wow, I know this was forced upon me then, but I actually understand it now. And there's like a wholeness, there's an integration, there's an embodiment, there's a level of awareness that it gets to be better. And he's so funny because now he's, received news that like his cousin has been diagnosed with MS really young. And there's more and more people again coming out with these really acute diagnoses very young. And now when you know better, right, he's wanting to do better. And he's, offering this information because you can't unknow what you know, that you can heal. And it's not my job to force that knowing on anybody, but for anybody that's like, I feel like I have trauma and I feel like it's showing up through headaches, or I feel like it's showing up through stomach or whatever, you're right. And let's talk, because there's just so much transformation that awaits. And I just wrote a post about it today. This is why science is so funny, is they want, of course, they want and need the empirical data, the research. The left brain of all of us needs that analysis. And there's efficacy there. There's validity there. We need to know what works and what's effective. However, when it comes to healing from like a transpersonal lens, or from a, from a spiritual lens, whatever you want to call it, there are so many variables that are immeasurable. And that's kind of the point. Like for some people, that's wishy-washy, because they want to know like, what's the beginning, middle, and end? How's it going to go in this very linear way? And I'm like, listen, if you're going to open the door, it's going to blow open, and we don't know where we're going to land, but we know it's going to be better. We know it's going to be better, and it might get worse first, but it's going to be better. And without fail, 100% of the time, that's happened with every person I've seen. So I had one client who I'll be seeing later today, who came in at like age 60, and she's been doing a lot of Abraham Hicks and a lot of positive affirmations and Louise,
Yeah.
stuff like that. And she's like, her big thing was financial struggle. She's just like, it wasn't even a physical thing or a mental health thing. It was just like, I just have this relationship to money, and I know I have trauma, and what the heck is it? Like, what happens in between, And we met on a healing circle. I was collaborating, doing a facilitation with another woman from the Women Thrive community. And she came into my one-on-one container, and she's changed so much. She texts me every week. She's like, this happened, and then this happened, and you wouldn't believe this, and blah, blah, blah. It's like all these light bulbs start going off, and these synchronicities, and people are so surprised, right? Like they come to me with a diagnosis in complete despair, and they're surprised. And I'm not, because I understand what's going on to some extent in this subconscious way. And then people come to me in all the light, and they're like, and they're so surprised. And I'm like, I'm not, because, right? Like we just are guides for the journey of the shadow and the journey of the light. and we hold space for all of it. So it's like everyone's so unique. It's hard to give exact testimonials other than the ones that I've like posted on my social account that I have on my feed and stuff like that. But I get texts and voice memos and accounts all the time of people that are just making every day very practical shifts. That's what we're going for. You bridge those together and then you have a different life.
That is so awesome. I love hearing that. I have a question. Do you um read the book, or do you use the book Louise L. Hay's You Can Heal Your Life?
It's personally the first book that was like the catalyst into this world for me when I was in my young 20s. And it forever holds such a soft spot in my heart because it was my internal knowing that I didn't even know I had access to because I was in the pit. I was like coming out of treatment for the umpteenth time, back home with my parents by myself. They weren't speaking to each other. They were on the brink of divorce, and I was miserable and like self-medicating, self-harming, all the things. And I lived at the library. I read 60 books in that summer because it was my entire life was just to like learn. And I had some spiritual awakenings. And I was like, let's find out what this psychic world's about. Let's find out what energy is. Let's find out about positive thinking. And like, okay, if I'm so good at being mean to myself, is it possible that I could be nice? Like, what does that even mean or look like? And so I picked up her book. And I remember just registering in my system this knowing that it was true. And all of a sudden I'm like decoding, right? Because it's like left side body is feminine, right side body is masculine. And then you're like, ooh, left side knee means this, right side ear means this.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it's like, this means this, this means this. And you're like, wait, does everything have a meaning? Like, does everything have a code where you can actually heal it once you have that awareness of it? And that was the beginning. That was just the thing that launched me into the rest of it. And then from there, Joe Dispenza and Bruce Lipton and Candace Pert and, you know, all the greats. So
Yes.
it's fantastic. She's a pioneer. It's amazing.
I was just curious if you use that book, like, because I still use it like as like almost a textbook for my clients. Like, oh, what's going on with your left ear? And I'll go back to my Louise Hay book and be like, oh, that means this. So I was just curious if you ever like reference that for your clients, or if it's really just everyone's different in the way they manifest physically.
Yeah, I don't use it for clients. I use it for myself. I used
Okay.
it for myself, like ritualistically growing up when I was in my young 20s. And then now I have this huge textbook. It's more comprehensive, I've found, than the You Can Heal Your Life. But that book is, you know, the baseline. That's like something you
Yes.
always want to have on your bookshelf for sure.
Right.
And
Everyone should have it.
for sure. And so I use this like A to Z ailments to diseases, like dictionary. And I think it's illegal in America because America.
Illegal.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I must get it then.
I know. I'll send it to you. It's by Jacques Martel and it's ailments and diseases A to Z. It's like a comprehensive decoding of what the subconscious roots are of physical pain. And there's more symptoms in there than the You Can Heal Your Life. And there's more depth to like really nuanced details of what could be going on from childhood wounding or certain limiting beliefs that you have. And so when I'm having very obscure symptoms, which I have, we're human, right? Like that's where I go is that book specifically. And if somebody comes to me and they're going through something really unique or like really specific or like a genetic, quote unquote, genetic mutation, something that's quote unquote incurable, like whatever it is that they've been told, I'll go there. I also have like a huge textbook of alternative and complementary medicine. If there's certain things that people are seeking, particular customized like action steps or herbs for, something like that, happy to reference those books, but it's not like a consistent every session thing.
Okay. Well, that's even better. Does it align with the Louise Hay one though? Does it like usually? Okay. I figured.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, it'll give like a generalized definition of like what the spine represents, for example. And then the spine has like upper, middle, lower cervical, and then there's lumbar and sacrum and all the things. And then it'll break you down from like all the C1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the L 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And yeah, so I've been having a back thing in my L4. I've been throwing my back out a lot. And I've just been persistently looking at this definition, reciting the mantra, the like in-depth affirmation, but more than that, I'll run self sessions, and every time without fail, for the last 6 self sessions I've done, the sacral chakras come up, and it's actually led me to the specific emotions that, on top of the generalized definition that is in the book, I need to heal specific to different memories and different times of my life.
Amazing. Oh my gosh. Okay. I know we could talk forever, but that was a lot of information, a lot of your own heart and soul. So I really appreciate you being here with me today and sharing all of that. It means so much to me. And where can people find you?
Yeah, so I am accessible on social media at Inner Realm Wellness is my tag. So Facebook, Instagram, I'm always there. You can always just DM me, say, hey, would love to hear a takeaway from our chat today. And then my website has a whole bunch of information about what are the 14 modalities and what can you expect in a session. And that's innerrealmwellness.life. And those are the three main channels. Otherwise, like LinkedIn, or you can email me at paige@innerrealmwellness.life. And then lastly, I take folks through like a comprehensive, like I said, retrospective of my why and my story in the Women Thrive Volume 2. And it was done with so much care and intent to debut my truth in a way that I've never done before. And as a writer, I've always sought to like give the inarticulable experiences of life words and to find meaning in things that I otherwise thought had complete no sense to them. And so if you're interested in that too, we can drop the link there for that too. But the link for it off the top of my head is womenthrivesummit.com/book. And no matter what country you're in, you can find it there.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here again. And I hope everyone goes to find Paige on social media.
Yay.
So have a great rest of your day, Paige. I appreciate it.
Oh, you too. Take care for now.
Thanks.